Well, aren't you all lucky? You're in for a treat again with my friend, Sarah Connolly, the amazing healthcare attorney to the stars, and in my mind, known as the truth. Welcome, Sarah, back to the show again. I needed a dose of truth. That's why we're here today.
I'm here to bring it to you, Sharon. There's a lot of things I'm seeing in the news that is not quite truthful or fits a certain narrative, and I'm here to tell it to you straight.
Ooh, I love it. Real talk with Sharon, real talk with Sarah. 2 new hashtags. Okay. Taking a deep breath. I'm going to tell a quick little story, and then I only want to hear from Sarah, not from me, okay? But it's relevant to what we're going to talk about. Sound good, Sarah?
Absolutely.
Okay. I went away on a little staycation, and I had my friend Sarah in my mind the entire time. So what did I do before I chose this beautiful hotel on Treasure Island? I called them. And I asked them what type of safety precautions were they taking in terms of protecting us during this global pandemic. I heard all of the right information that I needed to hear, and then we booked our stay. So the hotel was fantastic. The restaurant was set up just the way. Everybody there was wearing a mask. There was socially distanced signs everywhere, and I felt very, very safe, and it was very, very good. Sound good so far? Am I being a good girl, Sarah?
Yes, so far so good. I'm waiting for the hammer to drop.
Here comes the hammer. Okay, so then my husband was very excited about this Mexican place. We do love us some Mexican food. And because I didn't get to have Tijuana Flats Friday with Lissa, which is what we do have, we wanted to go to VIP. It's in Treasure Island. Have you heard of it?
I haven't been, no.
As a foodie, you will want to know. I hear it's amazing. So it's across the street from where we're staying, and now we're going to wait outside in the rain for this place that is the size of the room that I'm in right now at the Ring. Okay, it's a little bit bigger. But to create an image for everybody, I was starting to panic. I was standing outside in the rain, knowing I was going into a restaurant that was this small, and my common sense kicked in. It took a little while, and I saw all these crowds of people that it looked like there was no such thing as COVID-19. I saw a lot of people really close to each other, and I panicked, and I grabbed my husband, and I said, what the are we doing here? Let's go. So we never went in, but I have yet to feel panic like that until this past Saturday. And the reason that I bring this up first before you go and be the bad guy, which I love you being the bad guy because it's usually me. People don't think that there's a pandemic happening right now because we've opened up a little bit. And I want businesses to go back to normal just as much as you do, Sarah. And we want our economy to be in the right place, but I mostly want people to live. So that's how I'd like to get started, Sarah. And now I just take it away. I didn't go in, but I was going to, Sarah. I was thinking about it because I was being tricked.
No, Sharon, I'm proud of you. Let me say that. I know it's hard to be the one that continues to take a stance when we all want to so desperately want to get back to normal. We want to believe that we're out of the woods. And unfortunately, I'm here to tell you that is not the case. What we've figured out is that we do need to reopen for our economy, for small to mid-sized businesses that are desperate to keep their lights on, but that we have we've not reached the light at the end of the tunnel on this pandemic. And what I mean is we saw the largest single day spike here in Pinellas County last week, the same week that we went into phase 2, and the largest single day spike in Florida in 6 or 8 weeks. So really since the peak of the pandemic.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, how come there are other people in the world, the same world that we live in, that are getting different information than that? I'm being reported to in my own life of different numbers, of numbers that are not scary, that even since I physically with my eyeballs saw 1 million people going to Clearwater Beach Memorial Day weekend. Please tell me, why is that happening, Sarah?
So unfortunately, we have yet to see a standard way that we're reporting cases and positives. And many times it's being reported in a way that fits a narrative. Either what the media outlet wants to portray, what the state wants to portray around their reopening. And the reality is that until we have across the board a standard way to count whether something is in fact COVID, right? What does count as a positive? I'll give a great example. There's many states that are lumping together tests that are COVID diagnostic tests and tests that are COVID antibody tests, when those two things tell you two very different things, right? A diagnostic test will tell you if you have COVID now. An antibody test will tell you if you've had COVID before, but the latter has been shown to be really, really unreliable. We are not at the point where an antibody test means much of anything, meaning we don't yet know that having COVID gives you any degree of immunity. We think it does, but we aren't sure how much. And we don't know whether it makes you any less able to transmit the COVID to somebody else. And until antibody testing becomes widespread enough and reliable enough that it actually tells us something about whether that we're getting tons of false positives and false negatives right now. So right now, the antibody test results are really easy to skew in whatever direction fits the story that you want to tell. And that is a real fault in the data. We're trying to educate people on a true public health crisis, and we aren't even speaking the same language. We aren't even working off of the same numbers. So as the citizen who's trying to do the right thing, it's normal to be really confused and to hear conflicting messages.
I'm really confused.
Yeah.
I work in the industry, so I'm really confused about me being really confused. I'm not so confused that I'm not listening to you. I am listening to you. But there is, so for people, let's really try to help, right, Sarah? Unlike what a hospital said about this show that wouldn't allow a doctor to come on it. They said that this show was all about me self-promoting. So that's cool. That's actually not what I'm doing, but I do, I don't have time every day to do a show. But the reason that this show was started was to tell the truth, right? And to help people through this pandemic, to help, and who knew we were gonna get hit with racial riots at the same time, okay? We're gonna get to that. But what do we say to people like me that really, I feel like I'm a pretty smart cookie, but a lot of people around me, it's almost, I identify it like to peer pressure a little bit. I want to be with the cool kids, and I don't want to wear a mask into the store. I wore a mask into this office today, but I didn't want to. I had to tell somebody that came at me today that I love so much, that wanted to hug me, that I'm social distancing. And then I also feel like I have to make excuses about why I'm social distancing. I care about my parents. I actually care about the world, but yes, I'm not concerned about, I feel like I'm making excuses as I'm being real freaking transparent with you here, girl. I am willing to be humble enough to share all the things that I know are actually cray-cray, to help somebody else that might be listening or watching or whatever the hell they're doing, or pretending they're not watching and they are, and I know that. Sarah, what do you say to somebody like me? Help me be smarter about this, because I went into Starbucks today and didn't wear a mask because they were social distance, because they had that. So I thought, okay, I'm so confused. Please help me.
So I always go back to if it was your grandma, meaning anybody at risk, right? They're at an at-risk demographic, they're immunocompromised, which you cannot tell by looking at somebody whether they may have something that makes them immunocompromised. Unfortunately, this is a scenario where we're gonna say, I told you so. For the people that aren't listening now, the way that testing and reporting works is you have to be exposed, then there's a lag time until you're sick or not, right? If you show symptoms, you know to go get tested. And we don't know about these spikes in infections until 2 to 4 weeks afterwards, right? Long enough for the incubation period and for test results to come back. So I hate to say it, we are going to see a spike in cases from the protests, from the relaxing of the restrictions, that unfortunately some of this is going to be self-correcting behavior because we're going to see more cases. That is the reality. We are not to the point that we have any sort of herd immunity. We're not to the point that we have any vaccination.
So know what herd immunity means, Sarah.
That means enough people are sick that we develop antibodies from exposure to it. And the reality is, if we were okay with just exposing everybody to it, let the mortality rate be what it is, most models put that number at 500,000 people passing away if we did a straight herd immunity strategy. So nobody's okay with that. Nobody's okay with that number. If you are, that makes you evil. Like nobody is okay.
Let's talk about what, real things that I have heard and seen posted on different platforms. I remember when I was a kid, this is how stupid people are. Can I just be real with you? I remember when I was a kid, and my mom said we should have a chickenpox party. So everybody gets together and we have chickenpox. It's the same thing with COVID-19. Sarah, what do you have to say about that?
Chickenpox is not nearly as deadly. It's not nearly as deadly. And with that virus, it's something where kids are much more resilient than you wouldn't have a chickenpox party for an older adult who actually has a much more severe reaction and can have life-threatening reactions to chickenpox. We've learned so much about chickenpox that we know that kids can be exposed to it, and the mortality rate is really, really, really low. It's almost a rite of passage for a kid to get chickenpox. That is not true of coronavirus. It's incredibly dangerous for those who have any pre-existing conditions.
But Sarah, what about the flu? I mean, so many people have had influenza. Give me a break, Sarah.
Yeah, the flu.
But this is really the stuff that is making me insane about
the flu. People have short memories. The flu is very deadly. It continues to be deadly for people that are ill or elderly. What we've learned about the flu is we've gotten to the point of a vaccine that many of us get each and every year. We know it mutates every year. The strains become more drug resistant, but we still go back out and get a vaccine in the interest of public health, right? We know that many people get the flu, that if you don't get a vaccine, you're much more likely to get a serious version of that. So we have just been conditioned to understand and proactively manage flu in a way that we've not had that same light bulb moment with coronavirus.
Sarah, what the hell makes you qualified to say all this stuff?
I've talked to epidemiologists about active COVID infection.
I do appreciate that you laugh when I ask you that, but I know what people say. And so I'm calling them out on it right here because people have said to me, she is a healthcare attorney. Ooh, okay. So for all of you that have sent me a text message, this is the answer. Listen, go ahead.
I have worked with, since the start of this COVID pandemic, I have worked in 16 states, 16 or 18. I'd have to go back and check the number of states where I have clients with communities, healthcare facilities, long-term care homes, things like that, where I have managed, and it's the unfortunate badge of honor is maybe a wrong way to put it, that I have actively battled COVID, including in senior living communities, assisted living.
People die.
Several people have died on my watch. I have to live with that, and that's emotionally weighed on me, because if you have COVID in a long-term care community, for example, it is extremely deadly. Unfortunately, anybody that has heart conditions, diabetes, is just elderly and less able to mount the immune defense for this virus. I have seen people pass away. I saw a father and daughter pass away in one of my assisted living communities, and now the mom of that family is devastated and wondering how to move forward with life. So when anybody tells me that it's not that serious, or why should we care, the reality is, put yourself in the shoes of somebody who has lost a spouse or lost a parent, or talk to any New Yorker who the disease has been so widespread there. Everybody's lost somebody that's either close to them or at least an acquaintance. This
my girlfriend just lost her sister. So, I mean,
it's devastating. And the combination of flu season and coronavirus, many medical professionals are saying we must watch out for that going into the fall months. When we see a spike in flu, that can lead to things like pneumonia, like respiratory issues that can make people less able to fight coronavirus exposure.
So I want to read something to you real quick, because a doctor that wasn't allowed to come on the show because the hospital thought this was self-promoting. I asked if he would answer some of the questions that I wanted to address, because he was very angry about how specifically St. Pete was reacting to the opening of phase 2, okay, which I want to get to. How is the virus spread? Contact with infected surfaces or an infected individual, or within 6 feet of an infected individual. Okay, this isn't new news. What are the signs and symptoms? Some might be asymptomatic, while others can exhibit symptoms of loss of smell, cough, runny nose, fever, fatigue, and gastrointestinal symptoms. How severe can it be? Very severe. And it just goes on. Is there treatment? What kind of testing is available? How do I protect myself? So I'm going to say this from a doctor first. And then I want to talk about you. I want you to help us know what is the safest way to go through this phase, which some people think is phase 3, but we're still in phase 2. How do I protect myself and others in the community? Others being the most important word, I think, in that sentence. Continue to social distance. You agree or disagree, Sarah?
Absolutely.
Hang out in small groups with others that have done the same. You agree or disagree?
Small groups and socially distanced, but yes.
Okay. When entering a business indoors, wear a mask so you can prevent yourself from transmitting germs if you have the infection.
Absolutely.
Encourage others to do the same.
That's the biggest thing, encouraging others to do the same.
Don't touch your face and keep your hands clean.
And if you do, you need to wash them again, even if it's the 100th time today. Absolutely.
So none of that has changed.
None of those have changed, Sharon. And you touched on a few really, really crucial topics. The first thing you mentioned was symptoms to watch out for. And I'm still seeing so many people talk about this as a respiratory disease. A virus attacks on the cellular level, and you have similar cells in your GI tract. Not enough people are talking about the fact that nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, gastro issues are a very common sign of potential COVID exposure. Sudden loss of taste or smell. Nobody's talking about that, and that's a very clear indicator and a very unusual symptom that's an indicator of COVID. High blood pressure and risk of stroke. It also affects clotting. So if you numbness on one side of your body or swelling, of course, that's a scenario where you call 911, right? Symptoms of a heart attack or a stroke. But those are things that are on a cellular level, symptoms of COVID, that people still think, if I'm not coughing or I don't have a fever, I don't have COVID. And also not realizing that 35 to 45% of cases are 100% asymptomatic. People move through their lives not realizing that they're shedding virus for 2 weeks, a long period of time, and they're going about their daily lives without taking all these steps, thinking that they've not been impacted. And they can infect tens, if not hundreds of people, depending on what their activities are. So I can't say enough about knowing what the symptoms really are. It's not just a respiratory disease.
I'm going back home. I'm going back in. I'm putting myself back in quarantine. Okay, so I want to talk about that for a second, okay? Because we know they only have attention spans of fleas out there. So I get that. I'm the same. All right, I do want to go back in. I want to go back into quarantine. I felt very frozen this morning coming out. I felt it was necessary for me to come into my office. I felt it was necessary for me to feel some sense of normalcy. I felt the same when I was on this vacation. I'm not scared of getting it. I've said this many, many times. I am scared for others, being a very, very important word. So I want to talk about two things. Number one, you are not against you're not against people like having a successful business, right, Sarah?
No, as a matter of fact, I worry about my clients that are worried about their viability because of this economic downturn. I am all for businesses reopening, but reopening responsibly. You have a duty to your employees. You have a duty to your customers. I talk about the trifecta: screening, cleaning, distancing. If a business isn't doing all three of those things visibly, if I call ahead and they can't give me comfort around doing all three of those things, if I walk up to a business and there's no signage, there's no tape on the floor outlining social distancing, there's no hand sanitizer visible, that business is not getting my business, because that is not a safe environment for anybody. Trying to be outdoors as much as you can and making sure businesses hit those three. It's screening, cleaning, and distancing. Otherwise,
do you think
it shouldn't go in.
It's irresponsible of people not discussing it on their media platforms, businesses in particular? Do you think it's irresponsible?
It's absolutely irresponsible. And here's the other thing nobody's talking about outside of the business realm. If you've tried to submit a claim, again, I've been dealing with active COVID, right? Employees getting sick, residents getting sick. And when you report that to your insurance carrier, 9.5 times out of 10, they're going to deny it. There is a virus exclusion for most business interruption policies. Workers' comp, it could be with a sick employee that they'll pick it up, but your general liability policy, I've been getting denial letter after denial letter from insurance carriers saying you have no coverage for a virus. You have no coverage for a pandemic. And when it comes time to renew your coverage for next year, they're not going to do it without a COVID exclusion. So if you're willing to bet your business, it is no less serious than that. If you're willing to bet your business's bottom line by having employees come in without proper safety or having customers coming in without proper safety, then more power to you. But understand that all it takes is one bad case and they will sue you, and your insurance carrier is likely to say, you're on your own. And nobody's talking about that.
Well, I'm glad you are. Shit. Sarah. Okay, we have to get to one more thing before you go, which is very important because very timely, and I'm very proud of you. You mentioned when we were talking in the pre-interview, which our pre-interview consists of me congratulating you on your new home, because we don't plan anything. We just have a conversation that's hopefully vulnerable to encourage others to be just as vulnerable, to ask the questions, to say that they're confused, to talk about being scared, to talk about being anxious. Mental health obviously is a huge factor right now. You marched yesterday. Tell me about that.
I marched in St. Pete's Black Lives Matter protest yesterday. Very, very proud of my city for how peaceful it was. Minimal police presence, very peaceful, redirecting traffic, nothing but a message but love and support. I did notice that, of course, social distancing, very, very difficult to maintain. We tried to keep a 6-foot bubble with really limited success. And I would say maybe 2/3, probably less, were wearing masks. And you had every demographic from the elderly to families to, you know, all races, that very few people were, I shouldn't say very few, not enough people, in my opinion, were taking steps to protect themselves. The medical professionals are saying now, and no matter which media outlet you follow, you'll see them coming out in support of wearing masks at these protests and against using any sort of tear gas. There's been a lot of doctors coming out of the woodwork saying, please stop using tear gas because it makes people cough, it makes people's eyes water, it makes their nose runs, it impacts your lung tissue. So it's temporary, you recover from the effects of tear gas, but if you have that and you get stricken with COVID, that can be a perfect storm for not being able to mount your normal immune defense. So I really do caution. I'm obviously in support of the protests. I went out myself, but I'm very, concerned about people that may have pre-existing conditions, that may go home to their elderly relative or somebody that may be at risk because there's just not enough safety measures in place. It's great that it's outdoors, but still trying to keep that 6-foot difference and distance and still trying to wear those masks. I can't say that enough. And stop using tear gas. We should have everything be peaceful so that we don't have to worry about the spread of COVID on top of everything else.
Well, I think they need to interview you about tear gas, Sarah. Geez, it's very disturbing. I know somebody that has COPD that is not wearing a mask.
It's extremely risky.
Well, I'm saying that because I want people to understand this, like, we're not having this conversation. Sarah, you know what I'd rather talk to you about? Anything. Actually anything than what we're discussing right now. But I really do think that you can't come on this show enough because I feel like I need it. If I need it, and I feel pretty informed and I'm practicing all of what you taught me in the beginning, but I felt myself even relapsing a little bit because of what we are seeing. And unfortunately, perception is real. And so is peer pressure. Peer pressure, dirty looks, people being angry because you're wearing a mask, people being angry if you're not wearing a mask. People, there's no shaming. We don't need to mask shame. We have enough shame in the world. I really think that we need to continue to have smart, well thought out conversations. We don't tear gas. I mean, you're killing me even bringing that up because it is. It's like, it just goes right up my spine. But I'm grateful for you. I am. I'm so grateful for you. And I'm hoping that anybody that gets the opportunity to watch the show or listen understands, Sarah and I would say we're pretty much two empath types of chicks. We take on a lot of people's stuff. We don't want to be the reporters of bad news. I actually, I almost imagine the Grim Reaper behind your head right now, which is usually me. I'm the deliverer of bad news most of the time. So I'm happy to be sharing that honor with you.
I'm happy to help carry the burden. If I hadn't have had, I can say with a straight face, Sharon, that I've seen four different clients with new cases of COVID in the last 10 days. So I know that's anecdotal, but no matter what way you slice it, it is not gone. And I am pro-business. I am all for people making choices that make sense for their lives, but I am all about making sure those are educated decisions. You need to understand the risk fully so that any steps you take to protect yourself and your loved ones make sense for your life. And that's where I think there's a lot of narrative and a lot of polarizing media that doesn't tell us really like it is, which is we're not out of the woods yet, and buyer beware, right? Any steps you do that aren't in keeping with all this guidance, you're doing them at your own risk.
And thank you for saying Black Lives Matter instead of All Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter. If you say all lives matter, you're painting a broad brushstroke over something that is a uniquely Black struggle. So of course, all lives matter, but Black Lives Matter is fighting for people who have been systematically oppressed.
We've been talking about that for days now on this show. It's not sinking in enough with people. So thank you for saying it. Black Lives Matter. I'm a white woman. I have no right to complain about anything right now, except that people aren't wearing masks. I'm not gonna shame them now. I'm going to just be responsible myself. You've taught me that. I have to be responsible. I have to do what's best for my family, and that is important, and the people that I love and care about. And those are a lot of the senior citizens that are just suffering so much from the same thing that we started talking about in the beginning. It hasn't really changed. Yes, we're opening up a little bit, but we have to take the same cautions. So Sarah, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Sharon, and thank you for continuing to have this dialogue. There's nothing more important.
Thank you.
So don't forget, if you mention that you have seen the show or listened to the podcast, Thai Technology, 3 months for free.